All right, welcome everybody to the Behind the Vita, where we get to know UNLV Kinesiology Department faculty members. Today, along with myself, Ted Gerard co-hosting, we have John Mercer co-hosting, and very special guest today, we have Dr. Kara Radzak. How you doing today, Kara?
Great. Thank you, John and Ted, for having me on today. And please, Kara.
All right. So Kara, let's start about your path to UNLV. You know, everyone that we've interviewed and pretty much everyone we talked to at UNLV has quite, I don't know, distinct ways they got here. So let's talk about how you got here.
So, in order to talk about how I got here, I actually have to talk about you, Ted.
Oh, shoot.
I will just leave that hanging out there, and I'll talk about a little bit of my background first,
Yes, please,
and then
please.
I'll tease how I ended up at UNLV and why you played a huge role in it. So, I'm
As long as you
originally
don't like cursing me all the time.
No, I love it here. So thank you. So I'm originally from the great state of Texas and did my undergrad at the University of Texas at Austin. And before that, I was always the kid that thought broken bones was super cool. I knew I wanted to go into medicine. I knew I wanted to go into sports medicine. And so when I was looking at undergraduate programs, the University of Texas had this thing called athletic training. And I'm like, hey, you know what? I'm interested in sports medicine from an orthopedic side of things, from a rehab side of things. Let's look into this, and ended up getting my degree in athletic training at the bachelor's level at the University of Texas, and had an amazing experience working really with some world-class athletes. I got to be there working football during the Vince Young and Colt McCoy years, working women's basketball when Kevin Durant was with men's basketball. So I got to have some really amazing mentors and experiences. And from that point, I went to the University of Colorado Springs, for my master's degree, and did my master's in sports medicine. And the nice thing about doing a master's in Colorado Springs is the Olympic Training Center is there. So I got some experiences working with national governing bodies, getting that type of like inside experience, and that's kind of continued on through my career even now, working with some national governing bodies. I also had an amazing mentor, Dr. Mandy Elder, who is the head of research for Justin Sports Medicine. So I got introduced to the world of Rodeo sports medicine through her. And from that point, I did a thesis. I got my toe dipped into the research side of things, and I thought, I enjoy this research component. I could see myself going into a world of academia, but I wanted to make sure that I enjoyed teaching as well. I knew I liked being an athletic trainer, but I also liked research. So I found a job at the University of Central Missouri that was a lecture position and also had a clinical component working with Army ROTC cadets. And so I got to provide medical care for the Army ROTC and teach. And so I was able to find out, yes, I do enjoy being in the classroom. I knew I enjoyed research. I liked being an athletic trainer in the clinical side of things, and this ROTC population was pretty cool. And from there, I'm like, all right, I need to go on for a PhD if I'm going to make this my career, right? And I found a position posted that was for a PhD graduate assistant, and they were actually interested in somebody who had ROTC experience. I'm like, hey, I'm doing that right now. And it happened to be at the University of Hawaii. And so I'm like, I could live in Hawaii. It checked all of my boxes of wanting to wanting to do a PhD that had an emphasis in biomechanics and also working with an athletic training education program. And it happened to have this ROTC component that I found was fun and interesting. So I went out there for 4 years and did my doctoral work, had an amazing time, and was presenting at the Far West Athletic Trainers Association in Las Vegas. And this guy comes up to me after my presentation and said, when are you graduating? Because we might have a position and you would probably be a really great fit. And that was Mr. Ted Gerard. And I said, well, not for another year. And it happened to work out that as I was getting ready to graduate, there was a position open at UNLV, and here I am.
Wow. It's interesting because, at your presentation, I remember it was something to do with biomechanics and ROTC stuff. And I knew you were an athletic trainer. And one of the things that we were looking for here was, we were looking for a bridge between athletic training and biomechanics. And I think all of us, or a lot of us in the department, were kind of trying to find that person. And you just happened to be at the right place at the right time. And now look, you're tenured here and you've been here a long time. And, obviously we've all enjoyed having you around. So I'm glad that our paths crossed at that point as well.
Yeah, it really was fate because here I am 7 years, and I absolutely, I would have never said, oh, I'll live in Las Vegas. And then I came out here for my interview. I really did fall in love with the university, and it's been a wonderful place for my career to really flourish.
Yeah, it's interesting going from Hawaii to Las Vegas. It is quite a different climate, but just in your story, I really love that. And you started out, you said, with an interest in broken bones. So I'm curious, what broken bones did you have?
I have 2 plates and 12 screws in my left forearm. I was a competitive cheerleader in high school in Dallas.
Dangerous sport.
And so, I fell and broke my radius of my ulna, had to have surgery and had that done. I tore my ACL cheerleading as well. And so, and it even came before that. My father was a collegiate athlete. He was a track and field athlete. He was physically active. I got to see him. He would literally came home with his second ACL reconstruction. He came home with the video, and I was like in elementary school, and we popped the video in, and I was watching the scope, and I thought it was the coolest thing. I'm like, I want to do something in that realm.
Well, that is so great to hear. I mean, it's exposure to an area, and by having that exposure, you were able to go down this pathway. So tie that back into, tell us a little bit about the research that you direct.
Yeah, so most of my research comes from my clinical background of I really try to tie my research questions back to clinical questions that we have as clinicians that patients might have as well. So whether that's from a biomechanical methodology standpoint of why is it that some people who are undergoing the exact same training load in something like ROTC, they're all doing the same programming for the most part. They all have the same running volume, or even a cross-country athlete. Why do some go on to develop a musculoskeletal overuse injury like iliotibial band syndrome, where others don't? So coming at it from a biomechanical perspective of what risk factors could play a role from biomechanics into that. And that's kind of where my research kind of started, is looking from using the biomechanical methodology. And then it's really expounded into what are some other health factors or things in general that impact an individual's musculoskeletal health. And like I mentioned, my particular population of interest is Reserve Officer Training Corps cadets, ROTC cadets. So things like why do they seek care for musculoskeletal injuries? What type of musculoskeletal injuries do they actually get? We know a lot about an active duty population. We know a lot about basic training in the Army. We don't know a ton about what type of injury these initial entry training cadets are receiving. How does healthcare access or inaccess actually impact them in their future? So as most researchers will tell you, your research career, it goes and ebbs and flows based upon where the first answer leads you to the next question, right? And so from a biomechanical standpoint, I've switched and looked some on what are some other factors as well.
Well, it's great, and that I can hear that is that you're really looking at this from a big picture perspective in terms of where the injury is coming from, what is an injury, and so
And
you've
how
got
can we get them back to normal and prevent re-injury too?
Oh, that's great. I love that. And so you're taking a very holistic approach to this. So where do you find yourself, what type of tools do you use, whether that be from surveys to instruments in the lab? Where do you find your research driven with collecting data?
Oh, I am definitely the type of researcher that I see methodology as a tool to answer a question, right? And so when I'm coming from things I start with the research question and then figure out what tool can best answer this. And so it really depends, right? I do biomechanical studies. I do studies that look at big picture, almost epidemiology type things, using survey instruments, patient reported outcome measures, even working and collaborating with colleagues that have more of a qualitative background, right? So I've really started looking at how can I, as a quantitative researcher, bring on a qualitative researcher onto my team to start answering questions at a more in-depth level through mixed methods that alone we couldn't answer, right? So I can quantify and see what injuries people are getting, what their return to duty, what their return to activity looks like. But from the qualitative side, they can tell me what barriers there were, right? I can't measure that. So really, I've started in my research group to merge both and do some more mixed method stuff and try to get at, from a global standpoint, what's going on, but also kind of pin down into the underlying barriers to things.
Well, that's awesome. You get your what's it, hand in a lot of frying pans and something like that.
Yeah, I have like researcher ADHD. I call it following my research bliss. I'm just, trying to figure out the best way to answer the question. And a lot of times maybe I don't have the skill set, but I can call somebody who does and partner with somebody who does.
Awesome. Hey, Kara, let's switch gears a little bit here and let's talk about your podcast. So for those of you that don't know, Kara hosts a podcast, and it's for the Journal of Athletic Training. And John and I also host a podcast, but Kara's is much better, just so you know. So let's talk about your podcast and how did you come into that, and tell us about kind of what goes into that.
So I randomly got a cold call from somebody at the Journal of Athletic Training saying that they were looking for a new host for Jack Chat, which is a video and also podcast interviewing authors of current manuscripts in the Journal of Athletic Training. And they were looking for somebody who was out on the West Coast and had a different background than a lot of the people that we traditionally see in athletic training research. And because I've been more on the West Coast side of things and don't have a degree from one of the really common East Coast athletic training programs, I was somebody different. I was active in athletic training research at a really high level, but I was out here on the West Coast. And so got the phone call of that, and I've been doing it now for, I think we're going on maybe 2 years. And it's been so much fun because I get to again follow my research bliss and talk to researchers in completely different fields and interview them about about the recent publications in concussion and heat injury. And the last one that I actually recorded this morning were 2 individuals who developed return to play considerations following COVID. One at the secondary school level, one at the elite athlete level. So I really get to talk with people from all over. It's international too. So I've had some international guests and really kind of do the same thing y'all are doing, is asking them about their research and what are the take-home messages that athletic trainers they feel like need to hear on their research.
Oh, that's great. I enjoy listening to it. Sometimes I can listen just right through the wall, which is really fun.
Yeah.
Well, I love it because you're putting a face to the researcher. And so your students must really appreciate, that they get to know the authors at a little deeper level.
Hope so. I think it's more, I mean, personally, I find things way more entertaining to listen to them or view them than read them. And so it's just another modality of taking in information.
Well, speaking of information and taking in information and giving information, let's talk about your classes and your teaching. And so what do you enjoy most about teaching, or what are the topics that you enjoy teaching the most?
I love teaching clinical. It's clinical is my passion, but I would also expand clinical into anatomy classes, right? Some of my favorite classes to teach are anatomy, and really showing students that if you have a good foundation in anatomical knowledge, you now have a clinical superpower. You have X-ray vision. So when somebody says it hurts right here, you know exactly what structures, and you can like peel them back in your mind, all of the different layers, and go through this like order of, okay, it couldn't be that because this action isn't hurting them. And you really get the opportunity to have that X-ray vision. And so my favorite thing, whether it is a strictly clinical class, like teaching the graduate athletic training students who are doing their post-professional education in the athletic training sports medicine specialization, or teaching undergraduate students that are thinking they want to go into a clinical field. I really enjoy that moment when they start to think like a clinician, when they start to have that critical thinking and that turning point where critical thinking turns into clinical reasoning. And you can start to really see that next level of learning. I'm no longer memorizing like this is the origin and the insertion and the action. They're starting to utilize the information more. So that's my absolute favorite thing about teaching, is that moment when the students can start using it and thinking like a clinician.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm always saying that to my students is like trying to explain the difference between a technician and a clinician,
Yeah.
and how they make that change from technician to clinician, and it is exciting when you see it starting to happen, for sure. Great.
Well, I love that. And I like that clinical thinking leads to clinical reasoning. That's a really neat sort of mantra for how you approach teaching. But mentoring students, mostly, grad students and undergrad, is a big part. What type of characteristics, maybe building on that type of statement, what kind of characteristics do you try to really focus in on when mentoring students?
I really think I was talking to a student today, and I think my role as a mentor, and even in the classroom, but more so as a mentor, is to give the student the tools to be able to, when they leave here, they might not know everything, but they can identify the gaps in their own knowledge, know where to look, and be able to digest that into something that's usable,
Mm.
right? If I can give them that skill sets, that's going to take them anywhere they want to go, right? Even if they leave their current profession and go into something else, those are transferable skills that you're always going to have value if you can identify a problem, figure out how to solve it, know where to look to find solutions, and then make sense of it and transfer that knowledge to somebody else.
Mm.
You're golden,
Mhm.
right? So those are the things that I think we're using these courses and these subjects to teach you how to do that.
Mm.
The other knowledge is great, right? But if we can get you
Yeah.
that thought process, that's great.
Oh, that's wonderful. I love it. Okay, so those are all the easy questions. Hard question. What do you like to do outside of work?
Oh gosh. I really enjoy being physically active. Really enjoy being outside. Um Whether that is running, I'm a runner. I love to hike. I like to be outdoors, especially with my family. So my husband is from northern Minnesota, and he likes to get outside as much as possible. So we're always trying to go hiking and going on adventures. And we've passed that down to, we've got a son who's 3 and another on the way that will probably be along for the ride. And so any chance to get outside and to travel are things that really love to do. Whether that is traveling and trying to see all of the national parks
Mm.
or international travel.
Mhm.
Absolutely adore traveling internationally as well. Again, my CV it reads like a travel log outside of that one stint in Missouri, right? It's like Colorado, Austin, Hawaii, Las Vegas. So I really enjoy getting out and exploring.
No, I love that. And each of those areas are quite unique in the type of activities you can do. So I imagine, well, here in Vegas we can't surf, but in Hawaii you could. Did you
I
take
tried
up
it
water
once.
sport? Oh, once.
I did it once. Yeah, I'm not a big, like, that wasn't for me. I love the hiking in Hawaii,
Yeah.
like getting out and seeing like lush green, the hiking, the waterfalls, kayaking. Did a lot of open ocean kayaking.
Mhm.
Got to kayak the Nepali coast of Kauai.
Mm.
That was probably like the highlight. That was the last trip that we did before we were no longer Hawaii residents.
Oh, have you kayaked down the Colorado River yet?
I have
Oh,
not gotten a chance to do that yet.
yeah, I haven't either. I've been here since '99. I haven't done. I keep saying I'm going to, and I haven't. But it's supposed to be wonderful. All right, but how about the whole rodeo stint? You said you had a connection with that. No rodeo experience, or
I am all hat, no cattle, as we say in Texas. I was born to Yankee parents and lived in Texas, so was not exposed to rodeo until my mentor in my master's
Mm.
exposed me to it. But I do work the Logandale Rodeo when it's out here. I love when NFR comes through. I enjoy watching rodeo. I enjoy working from a sports medicine standpoint. I think from a clinical standpoint, I really enjoy working with athletes that are your non-traditional athlete, whether that be, you know, your tactical athlete with ROTC and military, working with rodeo athletes. I've covered international world championships for para archery. So Paralympic athletes doing archery, probably one of the most obscure ones that I have done is artistic roller skating. Traveled a few times being medical support for artistic roller skating, which is essentially, think of it kind of like ice dancing, but on the old school, like quad roller skates.
Interesting.
So yeah, my athletes wore sequins. It was it was really fun. I really enjoy working with those populations that might not necessarily always have an athletic trainer, but it's a lot of fun.
That must, all those experiences must be really neat to bring back into the classroom.
Oh yes, it definitely makes for some really interesting like clinical case studies. When I bring forward, like, okay, we're going to do a case study today. We're going to talk about supraspinatus impingement. And I start going through like laying out what their signs and symptoms are. And oh, yeah, by the way, this is a para archer. She's wheelchair bound. What are your considerations? What additional considerations do you need to take into account for her activities of daily living and stuff like that? So it makes for some really interesting curveballs, and a lot of people asking like, is that a real case? I'm like, absolutely. That was a real case about an artistic roller skater that you just helped with.
I love it because I imagine the students, when they get involved, in the program or even in the undergrad degree, they're thinking sort of neuro with a focus on sports being our major sports, but there's so many other things that athletic trainers do beyond working with the major sports.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's anybody who is physically active, right? That is my patient population. Anybody who's physically active, whether it be somebody who is in their 60s and 70s as a master athlete who is trying to PR as a master athlete in a half marathon, right? There's such a wide spectrum outside of your basketball, your football, your traditional sports, which, hey, traditional sports are awesome. I love traditional sports. I really enjoy working those too, but working with those other unique populations is a lot of fun. And it's really fun to take the knowledge and go back and forth between populations.
Awesome. Wow, Kara, you've taken us down quite a road. This has been absolutely fabulous. So thank you for sharing with us and spending a little bit of time with us. I really appreciate it, and I know the rest of the department also appreciates these conversations. So yeah, without anything, well, I guess, would you like to add anything before we sign off?
Thanks for coming up to me at the end of the FWATA talk.
Yeah.
You're most welcome. It's been my pleasure. I really enjoy working with you.
Yep.
So
It's been great having you on the faculty.
Yeah.
Thank y'all.
All right. Well, that's it. Another episode of Behind the Vita. We'll be with you again next week with Dr. Wolf, I think. Is that correct, John?
I think that's right. That's our
Okay.
schedule. All right. Thanks, Kara.
You're welcome. Thank you guys.
Okay. Bye-bye.